Good evening and welcome to the national news broadcast on ChannelEye. We are ready to bring you the top stories from home and around the world. I'm Natalia Veeravathana.
A very good evening indeed. I'm Charita Minuparachi, and let's move on to the headlines for tonight's news.
United Kingdom State Minister for South Asia, United Nations and the Commonwealth says Sri Lanka's program to empower human rights is making great strides. Ceylon Electricity Board says necessary diesel stocks required for generators at the ChannelEye power plant have been received. Financing of essential import bills for fuel purchases has been distributed among the Laotian banks. 72nd Upasampada ceremony of Sri Lanka Ramanja Mahanikaya of the Mahavihara Vansha takes place with the participation of the President. World Health Organization says the COVID-19 pandemic is nowhere near over.
On to those and other stories in detail now, and starting off with local stories. The United Kingdom State Minister for South Asia, United Nations and the Commonwealth, Lord Tariq Ahmed, said that Sri Lanka's program to empower human rights is making great strides. Minister Ahmed made these remarks when he called on President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the Presidential Secretariat this morning. He further stated that Sri Lanka will be able to resolve all issues pertaining to human rights by moving forward with a pragmatic approach to further strengthen it. As Minister of State for South Asia, the United Nations and Commonwealth, Lord Ahmed has been entrusted with a number of responsibilities, including cooperation with the Indian Ocean region, Central Asia and the Commonwealth. Responding to a request made by the President to assist Sri Lanka in achieving its goals in the renewable energy sector by overcoming technical hurdles, Lord Ahmed said he would look into the matter as soon as possible when he returns to his country and extend all possible assistance in this regard. He pointed out that facilitating investment in Sri Lanka could attract more investors, adding that people living in the United Kingdom belonging to different ethnic groups were looking forward to making new investments in Sri Lanka. An agreement has been already signed with the United Kingdom to provide employment opportunities for Sri Lankan healthcare workers. Lord Ahmed also promised to explore the possibility of developing cooperation in the economic sphere. The government aims to solve all the issues faced by Sri Lankans and create an environment where all Sri Lankans can live as one people. The President expressed the willingness to work with the Sri Lankan diaspora in the United Kingdom to the regard and requested Lord Tariq Ahmed to provide an opportunity for discussions with the diaspora. The South Korean government will support to promote employment generation, vocational training and investment opportunities, said Speaker of the National Assembly of South Korea Park Byung-seung. Speaker Park Byung-seung made these remarks when he met President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the Presidential Secretariat today. There is ample scope for investment opportunities in Sri Lanka due to its strategic location in the region, the President said, and requested Speaker Park Byung-seung to encourage leader Korean companies to explore investment opportunities. Nearly 22,000 Sri Lankans are employed in South Korea and they are happily contributing to the workforce. Speaker Byung-seung told the President that steps would be taken to fulfill the request made to increase the quota provided for employment for Sri Lankans in South Korea. The South Korean speaker also agreed to provide assistance to enhance vocational training opportunities in Sri Lanka and further stated that he would be willing to provide assistance to meet the present needs of the country. Korean Ambassador Jean Wooing, Minister Professor G.L. Pires, Secretary to the President Gamini Senrat and Foreign Secretary Admiral Professor Janath Kolambage were also present.
Meanwhile, Ceylon Electricity Board says necessary diesel stocks required for generators at the ChannelEye power plant were received yesterday. The required stocks of fuel oil are being received at the Sapugaskanda plant, and accordingly, Acting General Manager of the Ceylon Electricity Board, Prasanna Pereira, emphasized the ability to manage the grid without any power interruptions. Acting General Manager of the Ceylon Electricity Board, Prasanna Pereira, said that the CEB received the necessary diesel stocks required for generators at the ChannelEye power plant yesterday. Accordingly, he added that the gas turbine of 115 megawatts at the ChannelEye plant will be functioned. However, he said that required oil stocks are not to ignite the combined cycle at the plant. Yet he added that they expect the necessary oil stocks will be available in due time, and the engineering staff of the CEB has already taken steps to start the relevant machinery accordingly. He also said that Ceylon Petroleum Corporation is supplying necessary stocks of fuel oil to the Sapugaskanda plant, and they have agreed to provide necessary stocks until the 22nd. He further said that after 22nd, the Norachole power plant will be reactivated and included to the grid. However, he said that a delay may occur to this process. Accordingly, he added that negotiations will be conducted with Ceylon Petroleum Corporation to extend the supply of fuel oil to Sapugaskanda plant for additional 2 days. He pointed out that steps are being taken to provide 10,000 metric tons of diesel to the CEB at present.
And meanwhile, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka has taken steps to distribute the financing of essential import bills for fuel purchases among those licensed banks in broad prospections to their foreign exchange inflows. The Monetary Board of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka reached several decisions yesterday considering the prevailing situation to uplift the economic stability in the country.
To distribute the financing of essential import bills for fuel purchases amongst the licensed banks in broad proportion to their foreign exchange inflows, and also in relation to attracting worker remittances, that is to pay an additional 8 rupee per dollar for workers remittances in addition to the incentive of $2 per US dollar offered under the incentive scheme on inward worker remittances. This scheme is extended until 30th April 2022.
The Central Bank decided that we would once again, after a period of about 5 months, policy rate would be increased, mainly because we want to give a very clear message that we would want to see the inflation being dealt with, and also to give a message that the external sector needs to be stabilized further. We have taken certain measures.
How will we raise the money to purchase essential goods?
If you see one item of our policy measures, we have reached an agreement with the licensed commercial banks that they too would be bearing the financing and the arrangement of the financing of certain essential goods, so that it is essential goods are not only put as a burden to the state banks, so it will be in proportionate to the dollar earnings as well as the dollar incomes that they receive. We would be negotiating with them, and they will be taking a part of those bills as well.
Private banks by bearing some of the fuel purchase bills. How much do you expect from the licensed bank?
We believe that there would be a certain portion that should be also financed through those banks, because they receive the dollars coming in. And before items which are not of an absolutely essential nature, it is necessary for us to ensure that the essential items are first imported. If you go to some of the supermarkets, you will probably see some items which are not absolutely essential. But oil is. At the same time, coal is in order to generate electricity. So what we are doing is we have had a discussion with the bankers as well, and we have reached agreement where they also will take a part of the essential items, so that we don't only provide that to the two state banks, so that all will take part of it, so that the essentials are given first priority. After that, the others can be imported.
Sri Lanka saw a total of 51,583 tourist arrivals in the first 19 days of this year. A report issued by the Ministry of Tourism has indicated that this figure is comparatively higher than the previous year. Majority of the tourists during the period from the 1st of January to yesterday had arrived from Russia, with a figure of 8,816. Meanwhile, a total of 8,073 tourists had arrived from India, 5,087 tourists from Ukraine, 4,417 from the United States, 3,202 tourists from Germany, and 2,171 from France. The total number of tourists arrived into the country last year was at 4,495, and the number of tourists arrived in the country on January last year was at 1,682. However, a sharp increase of tourist arrivals was observed in November and December months last year. Accordingly, a total of 44,294 and 89,506 tourists had arrived in the country in the months of November and December, respectively.
The newly modernized Srimati Paya Prime Minister's office, situated at Flower Road in Colombo, was declared open today. The ceremony was held under the patronage of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. Unveiling the commemorative plaque, the President symbolized the inauguration of the office duties at the newly furnished office, following floral offerings to put the statue kept at the office premises. The President then engaged in an observational tour at the office of premises. The event to release the first decal of the commemorative stamp marking the inauguration of the new office was presided over by the President. In accordance with the concept of Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, the Sri Lanka Navy engaged in the renovations of Prime Minister's office under the supervision of former Secretary to the Prime Minister Gamini Senarath. This two-storied mansion was built in 1916 by Albert Emmanuel de Silva for his son Sir Albert Ernest de Silva. Following his demise in 1960, the family members donated the mansion to the government. Ministries of Education and Broadcasting and local governments and housing were established at the Sirimati Paya mansion. Subsequently, late Prime Minister Ranasinghe Premadasa shifted the Prime Minister's office to the Sirimati Paya mansion in the year 1978. The mansion, which is over 100 years old, was renovated after a period of 44 years while protecting its historic features. Symbolizing the inauguration of the newly modernized Prime Minister's office, a photograph was taken featuring the former Prime Minister's secretaries with the President. Minister Dalasalaha Peruma, State Minister Vidura Vikramanayake, Secretary to the President Gamini Senarath, Chief Advisor to the President Lalit Veeratunga, Secretary to the Prime Minister Anura Disanayake, former Prime Minister's Secretary, state officials and family members of Sir Albert Ernest de Silva were present at this occasion.
New Secretary to the President Gamini Senarath assumed duties yesterday. Subsequently, the new Secretary to the President visited Hunupitiya Gangarama Temple in Colombo and engaged in religious rites. Upon his arrival at the temple, Secretary to the President Gamini Senarath called on the chief incumbent of the temple, Venerable Dr. Kirinde Asaji Thera, and obtained his blessings. After engaging in religious rites, a Pirit chanting was held to invoke blessings for the new Secretary to the President.
New Secretary to the Prime Minister D.M. Anura Disanayake assumed duties today at the Prime Minister's office. The new Prime Minister's Secretary assumed in his duties after symbolically receiving the appointment letter from Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. Mahasangha invoked blessings on new Secretary to the Prime Minister D.M. Anura Disanayake following a Seth Pirit chanting. Receiving his education from St. Thomas College, Matale, and high education from Sri Javaradhanapura University, Secretary to the Prime Minister D.M. Anura Disanayake is a senior officer in the administrative service in Sri Lanka. He had previously assumed secretary post for several ministries including education, higher education, technology and innovation, and Mahavali development and environment, as well as education. He has also assumed the role of additional secretary to the President as well. Mahasangha officers attached to Prime Minister's office were also present at this occasion.
Commissioner General of Examinations LMD Dharmasena says all preparations have been facilitated to conduct the Grade 5 Scholarship Examination on the scheduled date of January 22nd. He made these remarks while speaking at a media briefing held at Colombo today. Commissioner General of Examinations LMD Dharmasena said that the objective of the department is to bring in the children for the examination on time. Accordingly, he added that directing attention on the children preparing for the scholarship examination, all necessary preparations have been facilitated, including examination, organizing activities and providing the question papers on time.
Today is the second day of the debate on the government policy statement presented by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa on the 18th. Leader of the House, Minister Dinesh Gunawardena, said 300 million rupees have been allocated for teachers from the budget of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's government at such a difficult situation. He added that payment of teacher principal salaries have already been commenced, which is a positive information for the entire nation. Parliamentarian Ranil Wickremesinghe said that they expect the finance minister to determine whether to resort to IMF or an alternative for the payment of $1 billion worth bond in February. Minister Mahinda Ammanavira said that Sri Lanka had to make a sum of $500 million worth debt repayment. He said that many entitles implied that the government would not be able to pay amount that yet government has made necessary payments. And meanwhile, the 72nd Upasampada or Higher Ordination ceremony of Sri Lanka Ramanja Mahanikaya of Mahavihara Vansha was held with the participation of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the Sri Sumanakirti Piriven Mula Mahavihare in Naranvala, Variveria yesterday. President Rajapaksa unveiled a plaque commemorating the Upasampada Mahavihara Karma for this year. The Upasampada ceremony commenced after the Mahasangha, including the chief prelate of the Ramanja Mahanikaya, Agamaha Pandita, Most Venerable Makula Sri Vimala Nayaka Thera, arrived at the venue. The Upasampada ceremony of the Sri Lanka Ramanja Mahanikaya is being held every 2 years in a selected area of the country. This year's Upasampada ceremony commenced on the 14th of Sri Sumanakirti Piriven Mula Mahavihare in Naranvala and will continue until the 22nd. During this time, 500 bhikkhus will be ordained at the Udukuhepa Sima Malaka of the Kalani River in Biyagama. Chief Prelate of the Amarapura Sweji Nikaya, Most Venerable Iguruvatte Priyananda Thera, Chief Incumbent of the historic Attanagala Arahant Raja Mahavihare, Most Venerable Dr. Panvilananda Thera, Vice Chancellor of Sri Nagananda University, Manilwatta, Most Venerable Dr. Bodhagama Chandima Thera, Assistant Professor of Dongguk University, South Korea, Venerable Thalgamue Dhammakirti Thera, and Chief Incumbent of Sri Sumanakirti Piriven Mula Mahavihare, Venerable Uruvala Vinitha Thera were present with the proposed titles by the President. Chief Prelate of the Ramanja Mahanikaya, Most Venerable Makula Sri Vimala Nayaka Thera addressed the ceremony, said the President had acted prudently to save the people from the COVID-19 pandemic by providing the vaccine. The Chief Prelate pointed out that the freedom to perform a charitable deed is the nature made available in the country as a result of the program. Venerable Thaldena Ari Vimala Thera presented the Patipada Shastriya Sangrahaya, complied at the occasion of the Upasampada ceremony to Most Venerable Makula Sri Vimala Thera and the President. After the ceremony, the President visited the Udukuhepa Sima Malaki of the Kalani River in Kaduvela, paid floral tributes to the relics casket, while the Mahasangha chanted Set Pirit and blessings to the President. The event was attended by members of Mahasangha, ministers, papal representatives, ambassadors and government officials. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa yesterday inaugurated the Wahal Kadatu Biyagama Sri Sudharmarama Mahavihare at the new Atpaura. The President visited the temple and inquired about the construction work at the temple from the chief incumbent, Venerable Veligala Amarasiri Thera. The Mahasangha chanted Set Pirit, invoking blessings on the President, who was engaged in religious observances. The largest Samadhi Buddhist statue in South Asia is planned to be erected at Sri Sudharmarama Temple. Venerable Veligala Amarasiri Thera presented a replica of the statue to the President. The Mahasangha, Cabinet and State Ministers and Members of Parliament were also present.
And with that, we move on to more local stories, where Dinesh Priyantha, who won a gold medal at the 2020 Paralympics Games while securing a new world record, received a new house yesterday. The handing over ceremony was held at the Temple Trees under the patronage of Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. This house was presented with the mediation of Minister Namal Rajapaksa. Accordingly, he received a house at the Metro House project in Slave Island, Colombo 2, belonging to Urban Development Authority of Urban Development and Housing Ministry. Emphasizing that the skills of para-athletes in the country are at a higher level, Minister Namal Rajapaksa briefed the Prime Minister on the proposal to include para-games to the National Sports Festival. The Prime Minister mentioned that expanding the opportunities for the para-athletes to showcase their skills is a commendable effort. State officials were present at the occasion.
Moving to the local update of the COVID-19 pandemic, health authorities emphasize that more attention should be directed on the increase of COVID-19 patients at present compared to previous days. They have pointed out that the importance in adhering to health instructions and receiving the booster vaccine is to control the corona spread in the country. Director of Medical Technological Services Dr. Anwar Hamdani said that the other countries in the world are conducting programs to provide the third vaccine to their people at present. He further added that only 31% of the eligible population of the country have received the booster vaccine. Therefore, he urged the public to limit their movements unless for important tasks under the present situation. The Director General of Health Services confirmed COVID-19 related 12 deaths which had occurred yesterday. A total of 35,002,903 vaccine doses have been inoculated to the people in the country under the COVID-19 immunization program. Accordingly, 16,294,449 persons have received the first dose of the vaccine, while 13,878,734 have received both the doses. A total of 4,829,720 have received the booster dose thus far. Meanwhile, vaccination of children between the ages of 12 and 15 under the COVID immunization program is successfully underway at present. And meanwhile, Sri Lanka and Japan celebrate 70 years of diplomatic relations. Accordingly, a series of programs are expected to take place throughout this year, marking the 70th anniversary. The foundation of the diplomatic relations between Sri Lanka and Japan was laid at the San Francisco Peace Conference held following the Second World War. Citing the words of Lord Buddha, hatred does not cease by hatred, then Finance Minister of Sri Lanka J.R. Jayawardena requested to pardon Japan was accepted by the international community. Following the conclusion of the conference, a Japanese delegation was established in Colombo 1952 and an embassy of Sri Lanka was established in Tokyo in 1953. The friendship shared between Japan and Sri Lanka continued to strengthen from there on, and Japan became one of the Sri Lanka's biggest supporter in socio-politic and economic development of the country. Accordingly, Japan has assisted 120 development projects since 1965 with financial assistance worth $8,829 million. 14 projects are currently underway at the country under assistance from JICA. More than 75 local entrepreneurs have received Japanese investments. Minister of Foreign Relations together with the Japanese Embassy in Sri Lanka have initiated many programs marking the 70th anniversary. Sri Lanka Rupavahini Corporation, National Youth Services Council and Sri Javardhanapura Hospital have been selected as partners for these initiatives. It is also significant that all three of these institutions are donations made by the government of Japan. Accordingly, short video competition, art and essay competition and school-level medical camps and youth leadership camps are included in the program. Minister Professor G.L. Piris, Japanese Ambassador Mishu Koshi Hideaki, Chairman of Sri Lanka Rupavahini Corporation Sonala Gunawardena, Chairman of National Youth Services Council Damit Wickramasinghe, Chairman of Sri Javardhanapura Hospital Professor S.T. Jayaratne and Director General of Government Information Mohan Samaranayake were present at this occasion.
Japan emerged as Sri Lanka's most significant donor by far from the time of the Colombo Plan onwards. Major irrigation schemes, development schemes were launched with the generous assistance of the government of Japan. But Japan was always able to change the emphasis of their assistance, depending on rapidly changing national priorities and requirements. It was not static. Japan always made it a point to ask the recipient country what their needs were. I mean, there are some countries which are very generous. We appreciate that generosity, but in some cases, there is always a tendency, or there is sometimes a tendency to decide what is good for the receiving country. Japan never decided for Sri Lanka what Sri Lanka needs. There was always very close, spontaneous interaction between the two governments, and Japanese assistance was always consistently tailor-made to fit in with the requirements of this country.
Japan will always remember that the former President Jayawardena kindly offered support for Japan's post-war return to the international community, or that Sri Lanka extended warm assistance to Japan in the aftermath of the Great East Japan earthquake in 2011. Japan likewise has been actively supporting our friends in Sri Lanka when they faced difficulties, such as at the time of devastation caused by the tsunami upon the major earthquake off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia in 2004. I am also very pleased that Japan was able to provide 1.46 million doses of vaccines to Sri Lanka so far in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. I am confident that this special year will be a fruitful one for us and will be a precious opportunity for both countries to strengthen the ties even further.
SLRC is a gift of Japanese government. We are fully ready to cooperate with Japanese ambassador, His Excellency Hideaki, and also we are looking forward to work hand in hand with the Japanese embassy in terms of bilateral relationships as well as all the other planned activities.
And meanwhile, Ministry of Health says a total of 5,500 dengue patients have been detected since January 1st. National Dengue Prevention Unit indicated that 60% of these patients have been detected from Western Province. The island-wide program for the prevention of dengue under the theme Clean Environment, Health Tomorrow was commenced today. The program is organized by the State Ministry of Provincial Councils and Local Government. A total of 9,000 dengue patients were reported from September and December last year. The National Dengue Prevention Unit said that most of the patients were reported from Kurunegala and Galle districts. Accordingly, people were urged to be cautious over the dengue disease amidst the corona spread in the country. And with that, we conclude tonight's news. Join us tomorrow at the very same time. Stay safe. Good night.
Good night. Available.